We are born looking at the faces around us to figure out who we are. We look into the eyes of our parents, our caregivers, the people who brought us into this world, searching for a reflection that says, "You are safe. You are wanted. You are precious, just as you are." But if you grew up in a home where love was conditional, quiet, or completely absent, you never got to see that reflection. You weren't given a blueprint for how to care for yourself because no one ever drew the lines for you. You were left in the dark, trying to figure out how to exist in a world that felt cold, distant, or entirely unpredictable. Instead of learning how to just breathe and be a child, you learned to navigate the world by reading the room. You became an expert at watching the subtle shifts in the air, the heavy sigh from the kitchen, the slammed door, the sudden, icy silence that filled the hallway. You learned to anticipate everyone else's needs before they even knew they had them. You thought that if you could just be quiet enough, helpful enough, or perfect enough, you might finally earn a tiny crumb of warmth. You shrank your own existence, your own voice, and your own desires just to stay safe, just to avoid being a burden. It is an incredibly heavy realization to wake up one day as an adult and notice the profound emptiness inside. You look around at your life and realize that you know how to appease, you know how to perform, and you know exactly how to survive. But you have absolutely no idea how to love the person looking back at you in the mirror. You can tend to a friend's broken heart with endless tenderness. You can show up for your job until you are running on fumes, and you can pick up the pieces for everyone else. Yet, when you turn that focus inward, you meet a wall of blank space. You are trying to build a home inside your own heart, but nobody ever handed you the tools. Nobody ever showed you what the foundation is supposed to look like, let alone how to lay the bricks of self-respect, kindness, and gentle care. You might look at other people who seem to move through the world with a natural sense of belonging, wondering what secret they know that you don't. The truth is, they were handed a map at birth, while you were dropped into the wilderness without a compass. It is not your fault that you feel lost. It is not a personal failure that you find it terrifying to sit quietly with your own thoughts, or that the idea of treating yourself gently feels like a foreign language you can't quite pronounce. You were trained to believe that your value only existed in what you could provide for others, not in the simple fact of your being. This lack of a blueprint means that every single day you are forced to improvise. When you make a mistake, your instinct isn't to comfort yourself. It's to bracingly wait for a punishment that you now inflict upon yourself. When you feel tired, you don't rest. You push through the exhaustion because you believe that rest must be earned through endless labor. You have been building a life on quicksand, constantly rearranging the furniture in a house that doesn't feel like it belongs to you. But the very fact that you are here, listening to these words, means that the survival mode is no longer enough for you. The quiet, exhausted part of your soul is tired of shrinking. It is tired of apologizing for taking up space on this earth. You are finally ready to stop searching the horizon for someone to come and build this home for you. And you are ready to learn how to do it yourself. Brick by painful, beautiful brick. Before we dive into how we rebuild that blueprint together, take a moment right now to ground yourself in this space. Feel the weight of your body where you are sitting. Take a deep, honest breath. Perhaps the first one you've taken all day, where you didn't have to carry anyone else's expectations. Drop a comment below with the affirmation, "I am worthy of learning how to love myself." Let that be your first conscious step toward a new beginning. Let it be the very first line you draw on your own clean slate. When nobody shows you how to love yourself, your entire sense of self-worth becomes a reflection of what you lacked. You don't see yourself through the lens of your own goodness or your own humanity. Instead, you look into the mirror and you see a profound, quiet emptiness. You don't just see a face, or the color of your eyes, or the lines formed by time. You see the heavy echoes of the validation you never received. You see the ghosts of the compliments that were never spoken, the hugs that were never offered, and the reassurance that you so desperately needed to hear when you were small and terrified. Because those spaces were left blank by the people who were supposed to fill them, you filled them yourself with the belief that you must be fundamentally flawed. You assumed that if you were truly worthy of love, someone would have shown you how to feel it. This absence shapes the very way you walk through your daily life. You find yourself constantly striving for a moving target of perfection, caught in a relentless cycle of doing rather than being. You carry an unspoken belief that if you could just work a little harder, speak a little softer, achieve a little more, or become completely indispensable to everyone around you, you will finally earn the right to exist peacefully. You become a shapeshifter, molding yourself into whatever version of a person the world demands of you in that exact moment. If they need you to be strong, you bury your tears. If they need you to be quiet, you swallow your words. You become everything to everyone, all while completely vanishing from your own life. It shows up in the smallest, most ordinary moments of your day. It's the way your heart beats a little faster, and you immediately apologize when someone accidentally bumps into you in a crowded aisle, as if your physical presence is an inconvenience to the world. It's the way you feel an overwhelming, suffocating sense of guilt just for taking a rest on a Sunday afternoon, sitting on the couch while the sun sets, feeling like you are committing a crime simply by not producing something. You look at a clean room or a finished task list and feel a temporary sense of safety. But the moment the activity stops, the panic creeps back in. The quiet terrifies you because in the silence, the mirror of absence forces you to face the fact that you do not know who you are when you aren't being useful. You have become an absolute expert at managing the comfort, the moods, and the emotional landscapes of others while leaving your own heart completely barren. You can read a micro-expression on a partner's face, or notice the slight shift in a coworker's tone of voice, and instantly set to work trying to fix it, trying to soothe them, trying to make sure they are okay. But you are operating from a place of deep emotional deficit. You are running yourself ragged, trying to pour love, patience, and understanding from a cup that was never filled in the first place. You are giving away the very nourishment that you are starving for, hoping that if you give enough of it away, someone will eventually notice your hunger and offer a piece back to you. Living in front of this mirror means you are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. When someone does show you genuine kindness or affection, you don't know how to receive it. You hold it with suspicion, wondering what they want from you, or waiting for the moment they realize you aren't actually worth the trouble and walk away. You have internalized the absence so deeply that rejection feels comfortable and familiar, while genuine love feels dangerous and terrifying. You are constantly looking for flaws in yourself to explain why you were left to figure this out alone, replaying old conversations and past failures as proof that the mirror is telling the truth. But the mirror is lying to you. The emptiness you see isn't a reflection of your lack of value. It is simply a reflection of the empty hands of those who came before you. They could not give you what they did not possess, and their inability to love you was a statement about their own limitations, never about your worth. It takes an incredible amount of courage to look into that absence and decide that you will no longer let the silence of your past dictate the volume of your future. It means standing before that blank space and realizing that you are allowed to be clumsy, you are allowed to be tired, and you are allowed to exist without having to earn it, because the environment around you didn't know how to hold your fullness. You learned very early on to hide the parts of yourself that felt inconvenient to others. You realized that your loudest laughter caused irritation. Your deep sadness was met with rolling eyes, and your attempts to say no were viewed as rebellion. To survive in a world that couldn't handle your complexity, you built a hidden basement in your mind. You took your anger, your tears, your raw vulnerability, and your truest boundaries, and you pushed them down into the dark corners. You locked the door and promised never to look inside again, believing that if you kept those parts hidden, you would finally be safe, and you would finally be loved. This hidden basement is what forms the architecture of your shadow. It is the repository of everything you were told was too much or not enough. Carl Jung beautifully captured this human struggle when he wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." When you aren't taught self-love, you inadvertently bury your most authentic needs, leaving the keys to your life in the hands of this unexamined darkness. You think you are moving forward, making conscious choices, but the old patterns of self-neglect are actually running your life on autopilot from behind the scenes. You see this architecture playing out in your adult relationships every single day. You find yourself repeating the exact same draining dynamics, attracted to the same distant, emotionally unavailable people who treat you with the same indifference you experienced as a child. You accept subpar treatment, tolerate disrespect, and minimize your own pain, only to sit alone at night, wondering why you always feel so profoundly empty. It is easy to look at your life and believe you are just unlucky, or that you are cursed to always be the one who loves more. But it isn't a cruel twist of fate that keeps you trapped in these exhausting cycles. It is the quiet, invisible habit of treating yourself the exact same way your early environment treated you. Your shadow is simply acting out the old blueprint, recreating the familiar pain, because familiarity, even when it hurts, feels safer than the unknown. Every time you swallow your anger to keep the peace, you add another brick to the walls of this internal prison. Anger is often the part of the shadow that we are most afraid of, because we were taught that anger is destructive. But anger is also the part of you that knows you are being mistreated. It is the boundary keeper. When you lock it away, you lose the ability to protect yourself. You become hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning the people around you, walking on eggshells to ensure their comfort, while your own internal world grows heavier and more suffocating. You are living in a house where entire rooms have been cordoned off, leaving you with only a tiny, cramped corner to exist in. Bringing down the architecture of the shadow requires you to stop running from the basement. It means finding the courage to open that locked door, not with a weapon to fight what is inside, but with a flashlight and an open heart. It means looking at your hidden resentment, your buried grief, and your desperate need for validation, and realizing that these are not monstrous defects to be purged. They are simply the wounded, frozen parts of a younger you that had to go into hiding just to get through the day. When you begin to look at your shadow with compassion, the illusion of fate begins to dissolve. You realize that you don't have to keep choosing people who make you feel invisible. You don't have to keep saying yes when your soul is screaming no. The architecture that was built to protect a vulnerable child can finally be dismantled by the adult you are today. It is a slow, trembling process of reclaiming the pieces of yourself that you were forced to abandon, and realizing that to love yourself completely, you must love the parts of you that live in the dark just as deeply as the parts you show to the world. The hardest part of this entire journey is the quiet, devastating realization that the voice inside your head telling you that you aren't enough isn't actually your voice. It doesn't belong to you. It is a recorded echo of the people who failed to love you correctly, the people who were too distracted, too broken, or too consumed by their own pain to see the light in you. When you are small, you don't realize that adults can be wrong. You don't understand that their harsh words, their cold rejections, or their heavy silences are reflections of their own limitations. Instead, you internalize them. You assume that their treatment of you is the ultimate truth of who you are. You absorb their criticism until it becomes the default soundtrack of your mind, a cruel internal judge that follows you into every room you walk into. Every time you speak harshly to yourself after making a simple human mistake, you are honoring that external verdict that was passed on you years ago. Think about the last time you made a minor error. Maybe you accidentally burned a meal you spent an hour preparing, or you missed a turn while driving down an unfamiliar road. Notice how quickly the anger rose up inside you. Notice the biting, mean phrases that immediately flooded your mind. How could you be so stupid? Why can't you do anything right? You always mess things up. That isn't the voice of self-correction. It is the voice of an old ghost. It is you reacting to yourself the way someone else once reacted to you. You are carrying out their sentence, punishing yourself over and over again for the crime of simply being human. Loving yourself when nobody showed you how means recognizing this internal critic and choosing, for the very first time, to question its authority. It requires you to stop treating the opinions of people who were deeply flawed and hurt themselves as the absolute, objective truth of your existence. You have to look at that harsh internal narrative and realize that it is nothing more than a bad habit passed down through generations. It is an unlearning process that is slow, deliberate, and often incredibly uncomfortable. It demands that you sit in the discomfort of changing the narrative, refusing to allow the ghosts of your past to dictate how you view your worth today. Think about how much energy it takes to constantly defend your right to exist. When you live under an external verdict, you are always on trial. You feel like you have to prove your innocence, prove your value, and prove that you deserve to take up space on this earth. You look for validation in the eyes of people who don't even know how to love themselves, hoping that their approval will finally overturn the sentence. But the verdict cannot be overturned by anyone else. The court is in your own mind, and you are the only one who can throw the case out. You have to decide that your value is entirely non-negotiable. It does not depend on how productive you were today. It does not depend on how clean your history is, and it certainly does not depend on whether the people who hurt you ever apologize. Unlearning this verdict means learning to stop when the critical voice starts. It means catching yourself mid-sentence when you are tearing yourself down and gently asking, "Who told me that? Whose voice is that really?" Usually, you will find it belongs to an old caregiver, an ex-partner, or a hypercritical teacher. Once you recognize that the voice isn't yours, you can choose to put it down. You can start to build a new, gentler way of speaking to yourself, a voice that sounds like a soft place to land rather than a courtroom. It is a daily decision to treat yourself with the kindness you always deserved, slowly replacing the cold verdicts of the past with the warm, unconditional acceptance of the present. It is so easy to analyze our past intellectually. We live in a world where information is right at our fingertips, and many of us have spent years reading the books, listening to the podcasts, and breaking down our childhoods with clinical precision. We can map out our family trees, identify every psychological term for our dynamics, and explain exactly why our caregivers or past partners acted the way they did. We know the roots of their trauma, the tragedies of their own upbringings, and the precise reasons why they were completely unable to show up for us. But there is a massive, painful gap between understanding your pain in your head and actually allowing yourself to heal from it in your heart. You cannot simply think your way into self-love. You cannot analyze your way out of a broken heart. You can spend a decade explaining why you feel empty, but the explanation itself will never fill the void. To truly heal, you have to move from the safety of logic down into the raw, trembling reality of your emotions. You have to feel your way there. Carl Jung noted this profound truth when he wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Notice how he didn't say, "The most terrifying thing is to understand oneself," but to accept oneself. Understanding keeps us at a distance. It allows us to look at our wounds like scientists looking through a microscope, observing the damage without ever having to touch the bleeding edges. But acceptance forces you to pull that pain close, to hold it, and to say, "This is part of me, and I am choosing to love it anyway." This means standing right in the center of the wreckage of your missing blueprint and deciding that, despite the complete lack of guidance, the person you are right now, in all your confusion, your anxiety, and your fragmented pieces, is entirely worthy of acceptance. It is a slow, difficult transition from the cold logic of why you were neglected to the warm reality of choosing not to neglect yourself anymore. It is the moment you stop saying, "I understand why they couldn't love me," and start saying, "It doesn't matter why they couldn't. I am here now, and I am going to love myself." Bridging this gap requires an immense amount of grace, because it forces you to face the grief you've been hiding behind your intellect. When we stay in our heads, we don't have to feel the crushing sadness of the child who wasn't held. We don't have to feel the anger of the teenager who was ignored. Logic acts like a shield, protecting us from the weight of our own history. But that shield also keeps out the love we are trying to give ourselves. To break down that wall, you have to allow yourself to be messy. You have to let the tears come without needing to explain them. You have to let the anger exist without needing to justify it with a psychological theory. Think about how often you catch yourself rationalizing your pain, telling yourself that it wasn't that bad, or that others had it worse. That is the analytical gap keeping you stranded on the shore of your own life. Healing happens when you step off that shore and into the water. It happens when you look at your loneliness not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a feeling that needs comfort. It is the moment you stop trying to fix yourself and instead choose to accompany yourself through the discomfort. You shift from being a critic of your past to becoming a gentle companion to your present self, closing the distance between what you know to be true and what you allow yourself to deeply, permanently feel. Self-love doesn't start with grand, sweeping gestures or radical lifestyle overhauls. It doesn't look like overnight transformations, dramatic proclamations, or suddenly finding yourself completely healed. Instead, it starts in the tiny, seemingly insignificant moments of everyday life, moments that require a quiet, radically brave practice of micro-honesty with yourself. When you have spent your whole life pretending to be okay just to keep everyone else comfortable, Being honest about your smallest feelings is the most revolutionary thing you can do. It is the act of checking in with your own spirit before you check in with the demands of the world around you, refusing to brush past your own discomfort just to maintain an illusion of peace. It's choosing to say a quiet, firm no to an invitation when every single fiber of your being is exhausted, instead of saying yes, just to avoid the agonizing fear of disappointing a friend. It is the moments where you stop yourself from laughing off a remark that actually cut you to the quick, refusing to participate in making light of your own pain. It is allowing yourself to cry in your car in the driveway when a sudden wave of deep sadness hits, rather than swallowing the lump in your throat, wiping your eyes, and pretending you are fine before you walk through the front door. When you have no blueprint, you build one brick by single brick through these small, intentional acts of self-fidelity. Every single time you honor your true feeling, instead of burying it to keep the peace, you are showing your nervous system that it is finally safe to be real. You are teaching yourself that your preferences, your comfort, your exhaustion, and your limits actually matter. For years, you might have believed that being good meant being convenient. You thought that if you didn't complain, if you didn't have needs, and if you never caused trouble, you would be worthy of staying. Micro-honesty flips that script entirely. It forces you to admit that you do have needs, that you do get tired, and that you are allowed to be an inconvenience to others if it means saving your own sanity. Think about how many times a day you lie to yourself in tiny ways. You tell yourself you're not that tired. You tell yourself it doesn't matter that someone overlooked you. Or you tell yourself you can handle just one more burden. Every single one of those tiny lies is a withdrawal from your self-trust account. By the end of the week, you feel depleted, resentful, and lost, and you don't even know why. The practice of micro-honesty is the antidote to that slow erosion. It means pausing in the middle of a chaotic afternoon, placing a hand on your chest, and simply asking, "What is true for me right now?" And then, most importantly, having the courage to listen to the answer, even if the answer is, "I am overwhelmed, I am sad, and I cannot carry this anymore." This practice will feel terrifying at first. When you start being honest about your boundaries and your feelings, you might feel an intense wave of guilt, as if you are doing something profoundly wrong. But that guilt isn't a sign of selfishness. It is just the old survival mechanism crying out because you are changing the rules of the game. You are no longer willing to abandon yourself to keep others happy. You are choosing to stand by your own side. With every small truth you speak, with every limit you set, and with every honest emotion you allow yourself to feel, without judgment, you are slowly rewriting your story. You are building a solid, unshakable foundation inside yourself, ensuring that the love you give to the world is no longer paid for with the currency of your own self-respect. When you begin to practice this micro-honesty and start drawing boundaries, your internal critic will likely get much louder. The moment you decide to take a rest, choose yourself, or speak up, that harsh voice will start screaming from the shadows. It will tell you that you are being selfish, that you are becoming a difficult person, or that people are going to leave you because of this new version of yourself. It will remind you of every mistake you have ever made, using your past as ammunition to keep you small and compliant. Instead of fighting that voice, trying to argue it down, or letting it completely defeat you, learn to meet it at the door of your mind with a calm, grounded, and deeply compassionate presence. You have to realize that this inner critic isn't actually an enemy trying to destroy you. It is just an old defense mechanism, a terrified part of your younger self that learned to criticize you first so that the outside world couldn't hurt you worse. When you were small, if you blamed yourself for the emotional absence or anger around you, it gave you a strange sense of control. If you were the bad one, then you could fix it by being better. Your critic learned that if it constantly kept you on high alert, you would never let your guard down, and therefore, you would never be blindsided by abandonment. It broke your spirit daily just to keep you safe from the people who were supposed to cherish you. When you understand this, your anger toward your inner critic softens into pity. You can look at that harsh internal narrative, see right through its cruel words, and recognize the profound fear underneath them. You can stand at the door of your mind, look this critic in the eye, and say, "I know you are terrified. I know you are trying to protect me from being rejected and abandoned, but I am safe now. I am the adult here, and I don't need to break myself into pieces to fit in anymore." You don't have to slam the door on it, and you don't have to believe what it says. You just have to acknowledge its presence without giving it the steering wheel of your life. By changing your relationship to this voice, you strip away its power to dictate how you view your worth. It turns the critic from a terrifying tyrant into a frightened child who just needs to be reassured that the storm is over. Think about how exhausting it has been to live with a drill sergeant inside your own head, constantly yelling at you for the way you breathe, the way you talk, or the way you handle your emotions. Imagine the relief of finally stepping in as the protective adult and saying, "No one talks to my soul that way anymore. Not even me." Meeting the critic at the door means establishing a clear boundary within your own psyche. It is the practice of catching the cruel thought the exact moment it crosses the threshold of your awareness. When the voice says, "You ruined everything again," you step in immediately and say, "No, I made a human mistake, and I am allowed to learn." It is a slow, daily reparenting process. You are building a new internal authority, one that is rooted in warmth, patience, and steady reassurance. Over time, as you consistently meet the critic with love rather than defense, the shouting turns into a whisper, and the doorway of your heart finally becomes a space that welcomes you home, rather than a place where you are constantly judged. To be the love of your life means you stop looking for a savior outside of yourself. It means recognizing, with a deep and quiet breath, that no partner, no friend, no job, and no amount of external praise can ever truly fill the void left by a lack of early love. For so long, you might have moved through the world like a person stranded in the freezing cold, knocking on every door you passed, begging to be let in, begging for someone to warm your hands and tell you that you belong. You looked for validation in the approval of people who couldn't even see you, hoping that if they loved you, the emptiness inside would finally vanish. But external love, as beautiful as it can be, is a temporary shelter. If the foundation inside you is missing, even the grandest palace built by someone else will still feel unsafe. You have to become your own sanctuary. You have to be the home you have been searching for all this time. This means making a sacred promise to yourself that you will no longer abandon your own spirit, especially on the days when you feel completely unlovable. It is easy to accept yourself when everything is going right, when you are productive, cheerful, and well received by the world. But becoming a sanctuary means showing up for yourself when you are at your absolute worst, when you are drowning in anxiety, when you feel heavy with grief, or when you have made a massive mistake and feel the familiar urge to run away from your own skin. It is in those dark, fragile moments that you must stand still, open your arms to yourself, and say, I am not going anywhere. You are safe with me. This practice shows up in the way you structure your daily existence. It means establishing routines that nourish your body and your mind, not as a punishment, not as a chore, and not because you are trying to fix a broken machine, but as a form of deep reverence for your own existence. It's taking the time to make yourself a nourishing meal and sitting down to eat it with intention, rather than rushing through it as an afterthought. It's ensuring you get enough rest, protecting your sleep like a precious resource, and creating a living space that feels calm and supportive to your nervous system. When you have no blueprint, you create a sanctuary by treating yourself like someone you deeply care about, slowly teaching your body that it is worthy of comfort, peace, and protection. When you become your own sanctuary, you create a beautiful, unshakable space within yourself that is safe from the shifting winds of external validation. You no longer walk through life at the mercy of how other people treat you. If someone ignores you, if a relationship ends, or if the world misunderstands your intentions, it will still hurt deeply, but it will no longer destroy you. It won't destroy you because the roof over your head doesn't depend on their approval. You become the person who holds your own hand through the panic, the grief, and the quiet, heavy moments of loneliness. You become the gentle voice in the dark that says, we are going to be okay. We can handle this together. Think of how much pressure this takes off the people around you. And more importantly, think of the profound freedom it gives to you. You are no longer a beggar at the table of other people's attention. You are the host of your own life. You are building walls made of firm boundaries, windows that let in the light of genuine connection, and a hearth kept warm by your own unconditional kindness. You are finally giving yourself permission to stop running, to stop searching, and to settle deeply into the safety of your own heart, realizing that the home you were looking for was inside you all along. Every single part of you that was rejected by the world is still alive, waiting quietly in the dark for you to welcome it back home. Think about all the pieces of yourself you had to cut away just to make the people around you comfortable. Think about the child who was told they were too sensitive, so they locked up their tears. Think about the teenager who was told their passions were foolish, so they buried their creativity. For years, you have treated these parts of yourself like shameful secrets, keeping them hidden away in the shadows, because you believed that if anyone saw them, you would be rejected all over again. You became a stranger to your own soul, presenting a carefully curated, sanitized version of yourself to the world, while leaving the truest parts of who you are locked out in the cold. But those disowned pieces are not defects to be cured, and they are not mistakes to be erased. They are simply the fragmented, wounded elements of your history that need your love more than anything else. Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." You are choosing, in this very moment, to become the person who integrates all these scattered pieces. You are choosing to stop running from your own history. Reclaiming the disowned self means looking at your deepest vulnerabilities, your messiest emotional reactions, and your painful memories, and choosing to claim them proudly as yours. It means standing up for the parts of you that the world tried to break, and deciding that they belong to you, and they are beautiful. This shows up in the way you hold yourself when your old wounds are triggered. It is the part of you that speaks a little too loudly or quickly when you get excited, because you are secretly terrified that people will stop listening if you take up too much time. It is the part of you that gets deeply, physically anxious when plans change at the last minute, because uncertainty feels like impending abandonment to your nervous system. Instead of getting angry at yourself for these reactions, instead of saying, "Why am I still so broken?" you learn to lean in with absolute tenderness. You pull that anxious, loud, terrified part of yourself close and say, "I see you. You don't have to be perfect to be here. You are allowed to take up space, and I love you exactly as you are." Imagine the immense relief of finally dropping the heavy armor you've been wearing for decades. Imagine how much energy it takes to constantly hide who you are, to always be on guard, making sure that no one sees your flaws or your messy edges. When you reclaim your disowned self, you give yourself permission to finally breathe. You stop trying to be the perfect, uncomplicated person that everyone else wants you to be, and you instead offer the world your genuine, unfiltered, and deeply human presence. You look at your scars not as symbols of shame, but as proof of your incredible resilience. This is the ultimate act of self-love, taking the very pieces of yourself that were deemed unlovable by others and making them the foundation of your strength. You gather up your sensitivity, your deep feelings, your fierce boundaries, and your quiet fears, and you weave them back into the tapestry of who you are. You look at the mirror, and you no longer see a collection of broken fragments. You see a whole, beautifully complex human being who has survived the storm. You are no longer waiting for someone else to validate the parts of you they didn't understand. You are the one who determines your worth, and you are welcoming every single piece of yourself back home to stay. When you finally learn to love yourself without a blueprint, something beautiful, quiet, and monumental shifts deep within your life. You begin to notice that you are no longer waking up in a panic, wondering who you have to be today just to make it through the afternoon. You move away from that desperate state of constant survival, where every breath is heavy and every day feels like walking through a minefield of other people's expectations. And you step gently into a state of quiet, unshakable sovereignty. This is the birth of the self-sovereign. It is the moment you reclaim the crown of your own life, realizing that you are the ultimate authority on your worth, your happiness, and your peace. You are no longer a guest in your own mind, hoping no one kicks you out. You are the ruler of your own emotional kingdom. You see this sovereignty showing up in the most ordinary moments of your week. You no longer walk into a room or a social gathering instantly wondering if the people there like you, scanning their faces for approval, or adjusting your posture to blend in. Instead, you walk into rooms wondering if you actually like them. You wonder if their energy matches the peace you have worked so incredibly hard to build. You become deeply anchored in your own truth, immovable by the neglect, the coldness, or the misunderstandings of others. When someone projects their own unhealed pain onto you, or when they fail to see your value, it no longer shakes your foundation. You can look at their judgment with a soft, compassionate detachment, knowing that their inability to see you has everything to do with their sight and absolutely nothing to do with your reality. You realize, with a bittersweet tear in your eye, that the love you spent your entire life searching for in the eyes of everyone else was actually the love you needed to give to yourself all along. The endless hours spent trying to please people who were committed to misunderstanding you, the years spent shrinking your joy and hiding your tears. It was all a long, winding road leading you right back to your own heart. You have written your own blueprint out of the blank spaces of your past. You have laid a solid foundation where there was once only quicksand. And you have chosen, deliberately and beautifully, to become the true love of your life. Think about the immense freedom of no longer needing the world to apologize to you before you can heal. The people who didn't show you how to love yourself may never understand what they did, and they may never change. But as a self-sovereign being, you realize you don't need them to. You have broken the generational cycle of emotional neglect by choosing to become your own caregiver, your own protector, and your own biggest supporter. You have taken the heavy, broken stones of a painful childhood and used them to pave a beautiful path forward. The journey was long, exhausting, and entirely unmapped. You had to navigate the darkest corners of your own mind completely in the dark, without a guide, a map, or a hand to hold. There were nights when you didn't think you would make it to the other side of the grief, and days when the old critic almost won. But you arrived here. You are standing here today, breathing deeply, completely by your own courage and your own grace. You are the architect of your healing, the savior of your younger self, and the sovereign ruler of your future. And as you step forward into this new chapter of your life, you carry the ultimate truth close to your chest. You are loved, you are whole, and you are finally, beautifully, completely home. Healing is not a destination where you arrive one day, unpack your bags, and never face darkness again. It is a continuous, gentle return to yourself. There will still be mornings when the old silence creeps back into the room, and moments when a sharp word from someone else threatens to shake the foundation you have worked so hard to build. But the difference now is that you know the way home. You are no longer stranded in the wilderness. You have become the map maker. Every time you choose to treat yourself with kindness instead of criticism, you are keeping the promise you made to your own heart. You have proven to yourself that you can survive the winters of neglect and still find a way to bloom on your own terms. As we close this space together, remember that this new blueprint is yours to keep, to alter, and to live by every single day. You are the love of your life, and that is a romance that lasts a lifetime. Before you step back out into the noise of the world, let's anchor this transformation one last time. Take a deep breath, settle into your body, and leave a final affirmation in the comments below. I am the architect of my own peace, and I am finally home. Carry that truth with you into the quiet moments, into the messy days, and into every single tomorrow. You did this. You saved yourself.